On the last edition of Tylermsa's Artfight Rewind, which I published right before Artfight 2025. Jesus Christ, I really take too long making these videos. I took on my sophomore season of Artfight with lots of ambition and sky-high expectations as I fought in the battle of ocean and space. Sorry, the battle of sea foam and stardust. And because everyone else chose to fight for Team Stardust, I was cast down to the 7 seas to become an ocean man. And against all odds in a rapidly declining mental state, I finished the year off with 10 attacks and expanding my limits to what I can possibly draw. In the end, however, it was Team Stardust that came up on top. By a fucking lot. However, all of that is in the past now, and so was last year. And during the off-season, the Artfight mods have added some actually reasonable changes. So trust me when I say that this year will be different. Speaking of different, the theme for Artfight 2025 is different, and is a more understandable battle of fossils and crystals. I wager that this theme was picked due to the popularity of cave diving and Minecraft, because ever since I was a child, I've yearned for the mines. But there was one last thing that will be different for this fight, and it's me. You see, there are only 2 ways to actively participate in an art fight. There's the fun way, where you can choose your loyalty to a specific team, make attacks to opposing team members, and make friendly fire attacks to your teams with a strong sense of discouragement. Or there's the funny way, where you can,
change sides.
That's right, you can actually join a team, make attacks towards the opposing team, then switch to the opposing team on the fly, and make even more attacks towards your original team. And yes, you have the option to change back at any time. And while there is a limit on how many times you can do this, it doesn't limit on how hard you can ball. Judging by these descriptions, you might have an idea on what path I trekked in 2025. I have to say, this mode is absolutely cracked, and sends the fun ceiling up to the fucking stratosphere. Plus, it opens the door for me to attack a broad plethora of characters, from femboys to beetles, from fellow YouTubers to people with a fucking Sam's Club full of OCs. Look, what I'm trying to say is that I've made Artfight 2025 the most productive July I've had in my entire life, where I draw actual boobies, experimented with very old and deprecated drawing software, accidentally oversimplified my art style, and inevitably became a slave to extreme amounts of procrastination. At this point, I would stop with this obscenely Brainrot intro, but first, we must art. And then, we must fight! Let's art fight! Now, before I go and talk about anything else, I want to discuss what I did for my battle pass, since I took a different approach than in years past. One noticeable difference is that I made it more like an artwork instead of just a word salad, because I realized that it was cleaner to add all that info in a caption. I also tried to make a neutral scene for both fossils and crystals to inhabit in, though to be fair, I may have added a little bit more crystals than fossils. I also drew Anthony in a redesigned outfit to celebrate the 5th anniversary of creating him, which I later made to be the new main outfit in his new ref sheet. Now, in addition to Anthony, there are also 3 other characters that I would like to introduce. First, we have Yenotna, basically stalking Anthony. Then there's a redesign of Aramidas, which was a character I made in an AU story with some friends a few years ago, and decided to pick it up again because I might eventually write lore for himself one day. And finally, we have Wayland, a new character that I came up with during my senior year of college, and his lore is currently, hey, what if I was born in the 90s, grew up in the 2000s, and was in college during the early 2010s? It's basically based on a fantasy that I've had for a few years now. And here's what the final battle pass looks like. I really love how it looks, and I included quite a few unintentional Easter eggs, like how the case structures spell out 2025, and how I determined which team I'm on by Anthony raising either a fossil or crystal in his hand, and... Wait a minute. No! It can't be! No! No! Anyways, because I'll be switching between the two teams, I'm gonna split this video and my workflow into 3 phases. First, I spent 10 days on one team, and then I spent 11 days on the other team, before going back to the team I started out on for the final 10 days. All I need to do is figure out which team to start from, which I just decided with a coin flip. And with all that being said, I'll be starting Artfight 2025 on Team Crystals. So to warm myself up for what is to come, I started the year by drawing Fantastic Red. I've had this character in my bookmarks for a few years now, and come to think about it, a lot of the characters I'm attacking in 2025 have been stuck in my bookmarks for years. But I wanted to attack Fantastic Red first, since I love his Dark Angel-like design. With the black wings and the dripping black halo, I was like, oh my god, I really need to draw him first. Now I remembered that I was playing around with the hues of black and gray in his color palette because having the hair, halo, wings, shirt, and pants all kind of the same color makes it a little challenging to figure out which was which. So I decided to use a little purple for the wings, a little yellow for his shirt and pants, and then I tinted his hair a little bit. However, I did keep the halo all black. And here's the final attack of Fantastic Red. I did do a few minor changes with the hands in post because, as it turns out, even artists can screw up little things like hands every now and then. But even with that error, Malho Arts really liked how I rendered my art and was honored to be my first attack of the season. Moving right along, we have only my second animated attack that I've ever made, featuring Lex. This was a character that I didn't have time to attack in 2024, so I spent most of the off-season analyzing their details and anatomy. And one thing that I really picked up on was the excessive use of eyes, where my intrusive thoughts asked, Hey yo, what would happen if you draw those eyes blinking? And that's where the whole idea stemmed from. Now, I don't do a lot of animation on Clip Studio Paint, primarily because the perpetual license that I have only gives me 24 frames to animate with, but I was able to do a couple of simple animations like each eye blinking, Lex's face winking, and their hand giving a gesture that they have their eyes on you. Quite fucking literally. And here's the final animation. I didn't do a lot of rendering this time around because I knew it would get muddied when I uploaded it as a GIF, but it was enough to get the job done. Funny thing is that Shadow Fairy Amy actually told me that the eye on Lex's choker does canonically blink, so I guess my intrusive thoughts weren't that crazy in hindsight. Next up to be attacked was Agnar Bear. And I'm going to be honest with you, this was really the first time I made an attack and expected a revenge in return. Since Yisha Stone seems to be very well known in the Artfight community for making clay models of OCs, and seems to be more willing to revenge any attack that gets in their way. So they created a point system for attacking artists, which I guess is a way to encourage people to try things that they're usually not comfortable doing. Which is exactly what I'm doing. Now, I faced 2 challenges while making this attack: drawing beetles and making more complex free-drawn animation. Fortunately for the first challenge, Yisha Stone provided guides on how to draw the anatomy of the characters, and as for the second challenge, I recorded a video of myself doing the animation as a reference for what keyframes to focus on. Now, as I was animating this, I was having some doubts because the animation of the arm wasn't perfect and a little weird to look at, but now that I'm looking back on it and realizing that I'm not particularly comfortable with free-drawn animation, I felt that it looked good enough as a reasonable attempt at trying something new. But yeah, after I finished each animated frame on the arm, all I had to do was draw out Agnar's Forge, and this attack was pretty much complete. Here's the final animation in perfect quality, and not the GIF quality that I needed to submit to Artfight. I have to say, this doesn't look all that bad when I think about how much I learned, and I'm really glad that I gave this a shot. Now up next is more of a joke attack, which is why it's a friendly fire of fish. I primarily picked this character because of its name. I mean, why wouldn't you? But my intrusive thoughts beg the question, hey yo, what if you made that character into a keychain? And I was like, wait, hold up. Let him cook. And this was the result of my intrusive thoughts winning over once again. Last but not least in this phase is Phantom of the Opera, which that name alone totally did not evolve into my newest hyperfixation. Now, when I was planning who to attack in 2025, I knew that Jacob Toons was near the top of that list, and the attack that I would make would involve some kind of theatrical stage. The only problem is that I couldn't decide who to put in the scene. It was either going to be Viana Metal or Maria Morales. But then, just as I was about to start drawing, I found out about Lurleen, Viana's best friend, who has yet to receive a single attack at the time. Combine the fact that Maria's bio conveniently went AWOL, I decided to draw Viana and Lurleen for this painting, which turned out to suit the scene much better than I thought. Now, there are a couple things I want to point out when I was drawing this out. First, I accidentally created my own ghost lore by making Lurleen's design more simplified, her colors desaturated, and having subtle, rough sketches, because when someone dies, you most likely remember only a rough idea of their figure, but not anything further. Next, I wanted to point out that for Viana's pose, I found an antique violin hanging in my house, and I actually spent time researching about proper posture just for me to take a reference image of me holding a violin. The other thing that you will notice is that I tried to make the violin worn out as a way of showing how Viana vents all of her mental health without taking a hit on her appearance. It's those kinds of things that, in my opinion, makes this painting worthy of polishing. And here's the final painting after doing a few tweaks in post. And I believe Jacob's comment sums up my overall thoughts perfectly.
The ghost of Lurleen still shines down on Viana. Even after all this time, she watches her every move and all that comes before her. It's hard, in a sense, and it doesn't always go how Viana wants it to, but there's no doubt that Lurleen watches over Viana and remains ever proud of her soaring career. This is genuinely one of the best attacks I've ever gotten from Artfight. You gave Lurleen and Viana such a wonderful dynamic, and it fits her so well. And the fact that you went and bought a violin as a reference, that is dedication.
You're next. Straight up. You're the next person I attack.
Thank you so much.
So after about a 12-hour break, I decided it was time to move on to the next phase. But before that happens, I would have to switch teams for the first time in my Artfight career. I was a little intimidated at first because I obviously had no idea how being a traitor would work, and I don't see many people doing this and sharing their experiences. So I was coming in blind and coming in raw. As I sat on the team assignment screen, my thoughts began to crystallize. If I do this, there will be no going back. Nothing can be done to unfuck that Thanksgiving turkey, no matter how grounded I am. I would forever be known in Artfight lore as a traitor. After some deliberation with myself, I decided to fully send it. It's time to go on the run as a member of Team Fossils. Now, the first character that I drew in this second phase was Astar, who goes online as Neon Arcade Stars. I found out about her when YouTube recommended me one of her videos, and one of the things that really caught my eye was, "Girl, how the hell did you surgically attach that whale to your ass?" What I meant to say was that her Sona had some kind of subtle Frutiger Metro vibe to it. So I thought it'd be cool if I tried to recreate her Sona, but in Frutiger Arrow. And because I was really committed to the bit, I made this entire painting on Windows 7 with a very old version of Clip Studio Paint. Now, trying to get this time-lapse to even work required me to use my capture card and record my screen from a second computer, because this older version of Clip Studio Paint did not come with time-lapse recording, and I was having trouble running OBS natively on my old computer. So in a way, this is more or less a sneak peek of my process when making a digital painting. Now I'm going to skip ahead through most of this bit because this involves me in drawing a rough sketch, doing line art, and adding the base colors to Astar. And that's usually the most tedious part of drawing for me, to be perfectly honest with you. You may have noticed that when I use Clip Studio, I often have a few reference photos shown on the top right in case I need to look back at the character I'm drawing or to study parts of a pose that I want to draw. I also have a tendency to be a little too organized with layers, which explains why some of the casual art that I make have hundreds of layers on average. But yeah, once the line art and the base coloring is all done, then comes the fun part of adding details and rendering. And you can probably tell that this is usually the part of drawing that I love the most, because I can finally give this foundation some texture and, I don't know, give myself some room for crazy ideas and shit. Now, one of the things I really liked about drawing this was giving Astar's overshirt and tail a glossy look, which meant adding some bubbles and foam to some kind of gradient and making it all translucent. I then made a quick copy of some of the components just in case, and then came the payoff, where I combined all the layers that go behind the overshirt and tail and hit it with some blur, and oh my god, it's exactly how I envisioned in my head. I mean, come on! Does this genuinely look like the arrow effect you would see in Windows 7? And yeah, after admiring my work, all I needed to do was draw a background and make sure that it stays consistent with that blur effect. And yeah, here is the final painting. To this day, I really liked how I pulled off this arrow effect, and Astar really liked the idea of giving them a Frutiger arrow type look. Continuing on this path of extreme experimentation, I wanted to make an attack using Paint 3D, which takes Microsoft Paint and extends it off a cliff. But in November 2024, it was pulled from the Microsoft Store, so its existence is only maintained via XApp bundles and pre-installations of Paint 3D on Windows 10. And because I wanted to see how in the world Paint 3D works, I decided to draw this balloon dog named Barnaby. One of the first things that caught my eye is that all the objects in Paint 3D that you can draw can be manipulated. So adding 3D objects for the model wasn't as bad as I thought. It wasn't until I was repositioning the objects around the space when the software became a little challenging to learn on the fly. But once I started getting the hang of it, it also became pretty easy to understand. Honestly, the best way I can describe Paint 3D is if someone asked Microsoft to install Blender and they said to them that they have Blender at home. And so here's the final model of Barnaby. I'm glad I gave 3D modeling a shot because, as I found out, Artfight seems to reward artists more points for 3D modeling than drawings, which I now understand why, making a 3D model of myself.
So I got this new Artfight attack. Basically, there's this woman, except she's got huge boobs. I mean some serious honkas. A real set of badonkas. Packing some dope on.
What the fuck am I doing with my life?
Okay, you get the idea.
I actually drew a woman with a large chest. I was really contemplating on if I really wanted to attempt this because the truth is I have struggled a lot with drawing breasts. It's funny because I've been secretly learning how to draw them for years, following tutorials and getting tips from colleagues, but the struggle was more or less mind over matter. It also doesn't help that I don't draw women a lot to begin with, and I am not a woman myself, so I can't necessarily make my own reference photos to bail me out. But there was one thing that I didn't think about until I was about to give up.
How do you keep your boobs up when you're performing? It's incredible.
Belt.
Yeah, so the belt around Harmony's torso helped me finally understand where the breasts are supposed to be located and how they're supposed to look like on the body. And with that, I decided to full send this painting, confidence and mental be damned. And here's the final painting after a few edits in post. To be fair, I was not striving for perfection, it was just more or less can I draw something that's completely out of my comfort zone. And honestly, shout out to Stellar Lightweave for not only appreciating and applauding what I made, but also being empathetic and giving me some encouragement to keep going. And who knows, I might revisit this painting in the future. So, after realizing that I've drawn female characters in 3 of my last 4 attacks, I decided to draw Charlie Newman next. This was another character that I wanted to attack in 2024 but ran out of time and energy to do so. But I wanted to make sure that I carved out some time in 2025 to attack him because I really love his character design. What was interesting about Charlie was that he was a scenic character, which at the time I had no idea what scenic meant until I started looking up examples online. And after getting briefed about the scene aesthetic via image browsing on DuckDuckGo and Wikipedia, I kinda knew how I wanted the painting to look. And yes, we're using the Windows 7 laptop again, just to get into the 2000s mood. Surprisingly, this is one of the few paintings where I've actually had to flip the canvas to make sure everything is centered and consistent. Which, now that I think about it, you might notice that some of my art looks weird when you flip it. And part of that is because I can get so locked in drawing something that I forget to occasionally flip the canvas. Just thought I wanted to confess to that. Now, one of the things I really liked about drawing was his hair. I found that using a finger smearing tool actually helped give Charlie's hair the shine from his references, and I honestly think it looks more cool to render than just using the watercolor brush. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about was the background, which I wanted to try to throw every color in the kitchen sink at, but I quickly realized that I was starting to get lightheaded trying to look at the scenic backgrounds, and I wanted to be able to see what I was drawing. So while I did try my best to incorporate bright colors, the background did end up looking a bit pastelish and faint. But honestly, it didn't make much of a difference since the bright colors that were coming off Charlie's outfit and hair were being put front and center. And here's the final painting. I'm glad I finally got around to drawing Charlie and learning something new along the way. Now, the last character I attacked in this phase was an actual ULTRAKILL OC. Yeah, so when I was looking for artists on the Artfight Discord server to potentially attack, I found QT being advertised in one of the channels, and I was like, oh my god, I want to actually try drawing this. And I did. Now, I'm once again going way out of my comfort zone since I don't have a lot of experience drawing robots other than RGBIA in 2024. But I figured since I have been playing ULTRAKILL for some time, I would at least give it a shot. And honestly, drawing machines in ULTRAKILL are actually very easy to do, which makes sense because of the whole low polygon aesthetic that's in the game. Now, there are a few things in this painting that I thought were fun to point out. First was the pump action rifle that QT is holding, where I used a clip of Sarah Connor reloading a shotgun with one hand as a visual reference because I genuinely thought that looked badass. Second was the style meter, which I came up with some ideas for style bonuses and ranks that definitely suits with QT's arsenal and personality very well. Lastly was the setting, where I tried to redraw the last arena in Sheer Heart Attack, which, hey, turns out to be the name of this attack. And that's because it gives QT both advantages to heal off of the blood of the damned and the electricity from 1,000 toaster baths. And here's what the final scene looks like. I've always wanted to get some practice with drawing machines and enemies from the ULTRAKILL universe because at some point I have to make all the thumbnails and stuff for those ULTRAKILL videos that have been on the back burner. Yeah, I just realized I have a large backlog of shit. I have to say, this second phase was all about experimentation. And by now, I've spent more time on Team Fossils than I expected. A part of me wanted to stay on Fossils to continue experimenting, as I've already burned my trust with Team Crystals. However, if there's one thing I've learned in the years I've participated in Artfight,
sometimes you gotta say, what the fuck? Make your move.
So with that, I switched back to Team Crystals. Now on the run for treason on two different fronts, there's not much time left to waste. So to kick off this last phase of the fight, I decided to draw Jax.
Alright, I'm clocking out. This wasn't fun at all. See you all later.
No, not that Jax. This Jax, a witch boy with gummy worm hair. This was yet another character that has been sitting in my bookmarks for quite some time, and only now was the perfect time to take a crack at it. On a side note, I'm wondering if bro has a peanut allergy or something because, you know, that myth where you can use peanut butter to get gum out of your hair. I don't know. That might just sound like one of those intrusive thoughts I had over the fight. Yes, it was. Fortunately, that intrusive thought didn't win this time. Oh, damn it. And here's the final attack. Now, I only found out while editing this video that I accidentally gave Jax baby hands, which is something I did not intend, but Spaghetti Corgi didn't mean to mind it. And seemed to like how I rendered the painting. So I guess as long as they were okay with it, then it's all good. For my next attack, I drew a friendly fire painting featuring Korra. Now, I was really on the fence on whether I wanted to draw her in 2025, but after finding out that her alternative outfit wasn't being drawn a lot by other artists, I decided to take her on because personally, I think her alt outfit makes her look more like a badass. Now, I was making some good progress with the line art and base coloring until I hit the dreaded wall where, I forgot how to draw breasts! Now at this point, I was really beginning to panic and was ready for my self-doubt to take over. But then, I remembered the underbust belt strat that I learned from drawing Harmony, and decided to try to apply it to Korra. And holy shit did that strat come in clutch. So after that Crisis Ed version, it was smooth sailing from there. And here's the final painting after a few minor edits in post. What's really funny is that I named this attack Back in Black as a sort of musical pun, but it turned out to be ironically appropriate, as Kiwami mentioned that Korra used to wear an all-black outfit back in the day before she began to wear red and silver. So yeah, naming this piece Back in Black turned out to be completely coincidental. So the character for this next attack comes from another well-known YouTuber.
Oh my gosh, that one is so cute. I want to make a mine forever and ever. Can it fully kill you and your personality?
That's right, the person who made that I Can Fix Her video actually participated in Artfight 2025, going by the username Poner, but I'm gonna call him Poner for short. And so I decided to animate his character Starton, just because I find it funny how someone made a character design completely from a single wall texture in Doom. Trust me, in a few years' time, someone will find a way to run Doom in an art fight attack. It's going to fucking happen. Now, what really caught my eye about Poner's videos is how they seem to be all vectorized and tweened, which is actually something I'm very experienced in doing over the years. So I decided to try to imitate his art style using Turbo Warp, which is basically an advanced version of Scratch. Now this attack took 3 steps to turn into a GIF, since Artfight only accepts animated attacks to be in GIF form on their website. I first went with designing Starton and made a few tweening animations with her arms and face, which I seem to have replicated very well with Turbo Warp. Once I did all of that, I recorded the animation on OBS, then I hopped onto Kdenlive to add the clip and render it into a sequence image. And yes, for those who use Kdenlive, I know I could have rendered it into a GIF, but I needed an excuse to learn how to use Krita, where I added each image onto the timeline before finally rendering it into a GIF. So here's the final animation. I gotta say, after doing this art style imitation attack, I've gained a lot of respect towards Poner's animations, given that he uses Adobe Animate for art and animation. Not only did he find this attack interesting, but Poner was actually surprised that you can use the Turbo Warp editor to animate in his art style. So I guess if you're looking for a free open source alternative to Adobe Animate, maybe give Turbo Warp a shot. Okay, next up to attack is this goober. There really isn't a lot to say about this attack. I just promised myself that I wanted to draw an attack using the real MS Paint. No 3D gimmicks, no extra layers, no AI bullshit, just pure, unadulterated Microsoft Paint. The way God intended. There's a reason why this attack looks very simple, but I was able to add some whimsical elements into the drawing by taking a screenshot of the painting on another computer and then painting over the screenshot. To be honest with you, I never knew how challenging it was to draw in MS Paint until I actually made this attack. The fact that there are people on the internet who make photorealistic art with this program is absolutely wild, and I totally respect what they do as a fellow artist. Anyways, here's the drawing. Again, this was one of those attacks where I wasn't aiming for perfection, it was more or less figuring out what I could make without using Clip Studio. Now, as we approach the final days of Artfight 2025, I would like to end my participation on a bittersweet note, and that's why it was appropriate for this last attack to be Beau Connors and his ghost friends Anton and Eugene riding into the sunset. I remember earlier on, I drew quite possibly one of my favorite backgrounds in 2025, but because I had so many more attacks to finish and my mind was so saturated from learning so many things in so little time, I actually considered leaving it unfinished. However, something in me said that 2025 was different than years past. And although my mental health was slowly worsening by the day, I still had enough gas in the tank to make one last push and get this painting done before time runs out. So I decided to pull an all-nighter and spend the entire morning of August 1st to finish the rest of this attack. And here it is after a few edits in post. I really liked how this turned out, especially since this was my first time drawing horses. And I personally liked how the heads of Anton's and Eugene's horses also matched with their faces. And with that, the last phase for Artfight 2025 is officially complete. So why is the video still going? I could have sworn that I got through all of my attacks this year. Sure, there was a few attacks that I tried to do, like this one that was going to be a play on of Fireboy and Water Girl, or this one that was just an attack based on that Fedora tipping meme. However, I ran out of time and motivation to do those. So what's with the holdup? Wait, what was that noise?
Tactical nuke ready for launch.
Tactical nuke incoming!
Okay, so as it turns out, there's one more attack that I need to cover, and it's my first ever mass attack. This isn't like the group attacks I've made in years past. This was an attack where I tried to cram as many OCs from different artists as possible into one painting. Now, my motivation behind all of this is to get a sense of drawing so many characters interacting in one scene, and to figure out how much preparation was needed to even get a painting like this from start to finish. Because I was working on another painting outside of Artfight that was going to require a whole lot of different characters to draw. And as it turns out, there's a lot of preparation that gets involved with these things. I started brainstorming ideas of this attack back in like March or so, which was going to be a scene in the rain. And by pure coincidence, I had lots of rain and thunderstorms in my local area throughout the month of July, which gave me an ample amount of opportunities to do field research and take real reference pictures of poses. Now, I've learned a lot while making this painting throughout the month, but I want to point out 3 things I took away the most. First was time management. There's no better way to say this, but if you want to make a mass attack, you have to start earlier on, like on day 1. Trust me, you might think earlier on that you can pull something like this off halfway through the fight until you realize that you're in too deep with multiple other attacks, which cripples your mental capacity to start on the mass attack and makes the feeling of procrastination more and more intense as the month goes on. To avoid this, I made sure to allot a consistent amount of time every day to work on the painting. And when it's that time of the day to draw the attack, I actually committed to the bit. I even created a playlist of music that I listened to just to get into the mood. With this strategy of starting early, I effectively conditioned myself to work on this major project while tackling other attacks on the side. The second takeaway was about handling scope creep. Now, it's totally normal to be very ambitious with how much you want to put into an attack like this, and brainstorming all kinds of ideas. But after allowing yourself to brainstorm, you need to figure out what makes the most sense and add based on what you're capable of drawing. I remember earlier on that I would animate every character for the mass attack, and I even simplified the anatomy to make it easier for me to animate it, but I later realized that I would be biting way more than I could chew, and I was coming very close to the end of the fight when I got all the characters drawn. So I instead decided to treat animated characters as a stretch goal that I can always add after the fight. And well, that change on the fly allowed me to get the attack to a point where I was happy calling it done. The last takeaway is checking the character permissions and always asking the artist if you are not sure about adding a character into a mass attack. Because as it turns out, not everyone wants their OCs involved in a mass attack, and it's totally within their rights to let people know how and how not to use them. You may have noticed in the time lapse that there's a big black censor bar, and that's because I added a character that I wasn't supposed to add into the mass attack. By mistake. Fortunately, I was able to remove it in time after double checking the permissions, and I'm honestly glad that I did, because the last thing I wanted to do in a low stakes art gifting competition is to start burning bridges and making enemies out of people. Now, the characters I included in this mass attack were mixtures of characters I attacked before, characters I had stuck in my bookmarks for many years, characters from artists I previously attacked and promised to attack again, and obviously, characters that have a theme around rain. Starting front and center is my homeboy, Anthony. It's honestly been a couple of years since I drew him in his rain gear, so it was great to see him again, and even teasing a few details for his eventual redesign. To Anthony's right, your left, is Rain, which is surprisingly the character that got me inspired to make this painting in the first place. I really liked his design and background as a fisherman, so I felt like wearing rain gear would be second nature for him. Next is Amaya, which was actually a last second addition, and wouldn't have been added if I wasn't attacked by Harry Food 001 and saw her character wiki. I liked her design and found her personality to be ecstatic. I also thought it would be funny to see an anthropomorphic axolotl in the scene to contrast with a lot of the other characters. Behind them is William, the owner of the Burger Zone. I drew this character because for some weird reason, his design reminded me of a specific purple guy.
I always come back.
Plus, William did not receive any attacks as of 2025, so I figured it was time to give him some attention. Next to the Burger Zone is the Mini Market, featuring a headshot of Mini Cliff. Now, I've wanted to draw Mini Cliff in a separate solo attack, but her wardrobe was a little overwhelming for me, to say the least. So I wondered, hey, I want to have a mini market in this scene, so why not have Mini Cliff run the mini market? And that's how it came to be. Next, we get into the left shelter. The 6th and 7th characters I drew in the scene were Lucille and Everett. I found their designs to be cool, but I don't necessarily remember when I added these characters to my bookmarks. The next 2 characters, however, are from artists that I've attacked in the past, with Angela Dawson being owned by Jacob Toons and Paulette being owned by Lucho Volk. This is actually one of the few character interactions that I made in this painting, with Paulette interested in what Angela is playing on her DS. Speaking of Paulette, I decided to try drawing her in my style after drawing her the year prior in a style imitation attack. And I do like the small touches I made to make her look a little more emo than what was provided in her refs. Leaving the left shelter, we have Jacob, who I might have collected with the intent of making a solo attack, but decided to put him here, waiting for the rain to stop. Next is Lasuna and her vampire friend Mori. Now, I do specifically remember trying to make an attack with these characters in 2024, but you guessed it already, I ran out of time and energy to do so. So I decided to put them here. I really liked how they turned out in terms of posing, given that I was trying a lot of different things during this art fight. And now we get to the right shelter. On the far left is Rika and May. Now, these two are very special to me, especially for Rika, because I have had her in my bookmarks since 2022. I actually have her older ref sheets saved on my computer because I've been wanting to draw her at some point for years, but I couldn't work up the courage to it since I wasn't used to drawing women back then, and I felt that drawing a cat girl would be a very daunting task. But here I am in 2025, finally having the courage to draw a cat girl. This came in perfect timing too, since Hazel Art provided rain outfits for both Rika and her friend May. So I decided to draw Rika sleeping on May with her tail wrapped around her as they wait for the bus home. To the left, your right, of Rika is Hunter Woods, which I merely remember finding on the Art Trades channel on the Artfight Discord when I was searching for possible characters to attack. I actually liked his personality and how his design is like, yeah, I'm just gonna throw these on and call it a day. Next is Rosa, which is actually the character that introduced me to Stellar Lightweave. I originally wanted to draw her in the Winter Elements for a solo attack, but after drawing my attack on Harmony, I found that drawing her in the mass attack would be more fitting for her. I also liked the way I drew her, with her body language being completely closed off. Next is Estelle, which I found back in 2024, and originally was going to draw her with Fantastic Red, but that ended up going nowhere. I still liked her design though, which got me to draw her a little annoyed with the next character, Noah, which I tried my best to draw him in a sort of man-spreading pose. I was originally going to draw him in a solo attack last year, but just like Estelle, the idea and motivation went absolutely nowhere, but I kept him in my bookmarks because his design was very clean. Not only am I glad that I added him to the attack, but I'm also glad that Neku's star allowed me to keep him in the painting, because the night before posting the attack, I found out that I needed to let them know that I was using Noah in a mass attack. Moving out of the shelters, we see P-John sitting on the curb. I remembered specifically drawing him because his name made me chuckle a bit. Like, he's a fat bird with a little rain hat. What's not to like about that? Last but not least is Adrian. He felt like the most qualified selection to be outside in the rain when searching for characters to draw, since he carries an umbrella everywhere he goes, and honestly, why not reward this OC for sticking to his shtick by adding him outside in the rain? And yeah, that's really everything to say about this painting. After spending a few days after the art fight, making some tweaks with the background, and adding some animated rain, my first ever mass attack was complete. And with all that being said, my participation for Artfight 2025 has officially been bookended. This has honestly been the best year for me to do Artfight. I feel more mentally sound than in years past, as I have had more time to explore different things and push myself ever since I graduated college, and I felt like I learned a lot more about myself than in years past. Artfight did have its moments though, with the website crashing, or kinda taking a while to make changes because of the influx in traffic, and other things that are outside the scope of this video that I'm not going to mention, but it managed to survive throughout the entire fight. And to top it all off, I got my very first Artfight win, which is so fucking crazy, since the whole month was basically a back and forth contest until the very end to determine which team came up on top. And to that, I want to share some GGs to those who participated in Artfight 2025, regardless of whether you finished the fight on Team Crystals or not. I also want to take some time to thank those who attacked me in 2025. I'm always grateful to see people make art based on my boys, and I received quite a lot of art from this past season than in years past. There were those who made some cool sketches, those who drew my OCs striking a pose, those who drew Anthony in different outfits, and there was one artist who even made clay models for all of my OCs. All of these turned out amazing, and I cannot thank you enough for making them. But yeah, all that being said, now that 2025 is over, I'll be going into hiding and give myself a well-deserved screen break. We'll see what 2026 brings. But until then, take care, y'all. That will kill it. That will for sure kill it. Wait, what? Oh, wait, because it's X11. You stinking thing, I was trying to crash you.